Rob Kerner with some stubbles. Thank you, Rob, for joining us to Leaders Talk. Let me have a couple of words as a start. So Change Leadership and Partners is a leadership and change provider. So we are a little boutique consultancy here in Buckinghamshire in the UK, and what we have one very exciting format, and that format is Leaders Talk, what we have today. And Leaders Talk is actually, it's an amazing format because we invite exciting, tremendous, and really exciting professionals like you today, Rob, and we ask questions. We ask questions about topics that are new, sometimes new to us, I mean, new to some other people, but certainly new to us, and we represent usually leaders in organizations. We work with leaders all the time. We work on leadership development, and not all leaders are involved in your topic, for example. However, though, the interesting thing is that what you do affects leaders. So it's good to know about things, because otherwise it will bite you in your backside if you don't know. And that's why we have you here, Rob. So maybe the first, maybe you have a couple of sentences about yourself, so that we get a picture who you are and what you do.
Sure thing, Marcus. Thanks for that. And yes, I did fly in late last night, so sorry about my stubble there, but I thought more important to be here and ready to go. I'll try to be very quick with my introduction, but really I've had 3 careers in my life. And I think what I'm finding is hopefully at my age now, the 3 careers are coming together into something, coherent. So the first one is I was a sort of F-14 fighter pilot in the US Navy. So I did that for 10 years, and amazing experience and all kinds of things you would imagine you would do in that kind of job. Top Gun has been great for my life, I have to say, as a movie, and Tom Cruise has done a great job sort of promoting the whole thing. But amazing experience. I didn't want to be in the airlines. I really didn't want to stay in the Navy, and thought I need to get out. So I got my MBA my last 2 years in the Navy, and went into the next sets of 2 careers, which is really about business. And they fall into 2 categories. One is corporate jobs, where I've basically done roles in finance, operations, strategy, and innovation. At HP, RBS in the UK, and also John Deere in the US, so in San Diego. Interspersed between those kind of corporate roles, and those are sort of 3 to 5 year kind of corporate stints, we're really kind of working with startups and scale-ups, and this is in the business. So I've worked, and I think I've counted up now about 10 different startups. Everything from CEO to biz dev to finance to marketing, to the whole sort of gamut. And I guess what, as I said earlier, was I've seen my career sort of coming together now, and kind of how do I package that up? And what I've found is really it's working with the startup community and the scale community to understand kind of the corporate world and what they're looking for, and then working with corporates and kind of investor groups to think how do they kind of work better with the startup world. And one of the things I found really interesting in the last few years is how do corporates try to grow ideas, either internally, so internal ideas that are sitting on the shelf, and every company has them, smart engineers, and they're desperate to sort of bring their idea to life. And the list is endless in big corporates and technology companies that have just not missed the boat because they didn't kind of incubate and grow these ideas internally. And also investor groups, how are they trying to look at the startup world and being more efficient on finding, companies that, they can invest in, but then how do they ensure that the company actually delivers that impact? So kind of think of that 2 worlds. I think for today's audience, we'll park the investors, but, in the corporate world, and maybe people aren't familiar with the term corporate venture building. And maybe we should have, I think, touch on that today, because I think that's probably the most poignant to this discussion with the kind of corporate leaders today. And really what this involves, and let me just give kind of my quick example of that, and then we can kind of stop and ask questions if you like. But it really involves this idea of taking these internal ideas And rather than pushing it through the internal systems of the organization, and most big organizations are not set up for that. They will try to say they are, but they just aren't, right? Because they're a scale business. Their risk appetite has to be low because they're an international business. They're a listed company. They can't take those chances, right? And there's a reason for that. I mean, you can say, well, they should be, but they can't, right? It's just not. It's incompatible with their core business. Is the best way of saying it. And then you have these entrepreneurs like me, like other people that are out here that are used to sort of bending rules, moving fast, fail fast, all that kind of innovation world. And that's how our brains are wired. So it's almost like two people talking different languages. And what I found is what you do is you take the idea out of the business, you bring a few of the people from the inside, the intrapreneurs of the business. They're frustrated, they can't get their idea going. And a few people understand how the internal businesses work, who to talk to get money, who to kind of open doors. But then you pair them up with external experts in sort of entrepreneur startup world, and you grow that business, we'll call it alongside the business, right? So it usually it depends on what it is, whether you change the brand, whether you completely make a new brand, but it allows you to go much faster. And the kind of key thing here is how fast do you test that idea? What you don't want is this sitting on a shelf, and you also don't want to sit there and spend 2 years of corporate time investing in something that's not going to go anyplace, right? No one's going to buy it. So that's it. It's all about failing fast, testing the idea quickly, and incubating it. And then you have basically 3 paths. So if it is growing and it's something that the business wants to keep inside, you bring it back in. So you started a process of bringing it back into the business. If it's something that's never going to go anywhere, you kill it, right? And that's it's less expensive than trying to kill it internally with all the people and the meetings and all that. And then there's a third option, which you could sort of license it, sell it off, let it live outside, and kind of take some sort of position in that. So there's kind of a natural path, a natural endpoint to these things. And I think it's having done a few of them now, I found it to be, and having tried to do it internally at different companies, there's no comparison about how fast you can go and how much safer it is for the corporate to do these kind of things that way. So anyway, that's the sort of preamble. But yeah, please, over to you, Marcus. I see you scribbling and thinking as always, so it's great.
Yeah, I'm just scribbling and thinking. So, but let me start with the beginning and with your introduction, because I mean, I think I heard about your Navy career, but it's of course that is fascinating, but it's also fascinating that you have been in the corporate world in finance and talking about corporate ventures. I think that's a topic we have to touch today. So, but also innovation. I think that's a very good combination because you have been in the bottleneck. Probably, you have been there where there were the good ideas, and then it was. I mean, it's an assumption, but often it is stalled then, or sometimes innovation don't go anywhere. But you're also working in the startup community. So in the startup community, where by definition it is fast moving and more risky and maybe a bit more crazy, which is also, so it's a fascinating mix. So I understood what a corporate venture is. So basically, in my simple terms, is taking not whole innovation, but let's say one project innovation, like one idea, or maybe it's multiple ideas, and it's a direction coming probably from a strategic direction. You take that out of the corporate world and you put it into a new corporate world, and you grow it. Do you grow it with the old people, or do you grow it with new people?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think each one's slightly different, but you need some people that from the inside to understand it, obviously. Yes. But you need some external people that are kind of wired differently to do that. And that's the kind of combination of the two. And what you'll find is that the internal people tend to love it, right? Because they're freed a little bit from the kind of, they can see outside into the world that they haven't seen before. And a lot of times those people will come back in almost, changed. Their brain, their chip is changed. They think, wow, I never thought that way. And I never would even occur to me to think, to do it this way. So they get to see a little bit a live environment of how that other world lives, basically. And I think also it's a great appreciation for the external people to see how the corporate world has to deal with, as I said earlier. I mean, there's a core business that's going, and you can't just go breaking that. You don't get any points for breaking the core business of a big corporate.
So let's stay a bit with these people, like internal people. I mean, external people we can buy in, but internal people who have been in good jobs with good contracts for a number of years within an organization. What kind of leaders are these? Do they get a new contract as well when they enter a corporate venture?
No, these are people who are running. They're freed up from their day jobs to run this project, right? So just like you have 3 projects you're running, you have one of the projects happens to be one that's running outside, and not solely internally. These are still running internally. So don't get me wrong. There's still checkpoints internally. There's still presentations. There's still anything you'd have in a normal business where you're doing a project and spending money. So there's still a governance model.
Okay.
But but the bulk of the work is happening outside, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think what the key thing is really the governance model is quicker because, if you say to risk, for example, they'll bring up all the usual risks, which are all valid around data protection and KYC, know your customers, and these are all things that big companies need to follow. It's just GDPR. So your startup outside can't break the law, right? Don't get me wrong. This isn't sort of breaking laws and running around illegal, but it's working at the level that needs to be applicable at that size, right? So if you've got 40 people on a pilot and you've got 10 million customers, there's a different level of kind of scrutiny that has to be done there. And so I think it's about them running this project, but having almost like a separate team over here that's running at a sort of different pace, and how they do that. So,
but it's a different legal entity. Is that right?
Usually, yeah. That's the kind of key thing is you make it a different legal entity to keep the risk away, right? So what they don't want is to come back, right? So it doesn't come back through risk in the tax area is always a big one. Risk in kind of just brand risk. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, I have to go again to that leader. So these leaders, are they selected by, what's the ideal leader? What's the ideal people for these corporate ventures? And if you found them and they're going through that corporate venture with this all up and down, let's say the corporate venture is your startup, then they'll probably come back with you said already, with a different mindset. Is that helpful for an organization? Is that not helpful?
Absolutely.
Does it accelerate your career? Because I would love to know that.
I think you're right. And it's a very good point. I mean, I think of this called like the frustrated entrepreneur, right? So this is a guy who's a corporate role, but always on the side, they're always looking at kind of new technologies, and they're always sort of keeping up with that. And they want to do something different. They can see that, I have a day job because I've got to pay my bills, but I've always wanted to kind of be an entrepreneur kind of thing. So really frustrated entrepreneurs. And, a lot of times you may lose those people too, right? So some of these best people may leave to go start a new business because that's what happens, right? I mean, you leave and you create a little startup and you compete back with the mothership you just came from because you know how to do it. So to your point, maybe it's about retention. How do you say, look, I don't want you leaving. You're a valued employee here. But we're going to give you this little external team to, I wouldn't say play, but you're going to be able to kind of play in a sandbox. And then to your point, what happens when they come back in? Let's call it 6 months later, when the project's sort of going and back in, they're changed. And, a lot of innovation change in companies happens through, I think osmosis of people coming in and being different. So, HR companies talk about sort of how do you take them out, retrain them, change the brain a bit, come back in again. And then they kind of like a virus, they go through the organization and sort of, get the ideas back. So these people should come back with a whole new eyes open. They've read about it, they've heard about it. Now they've done it, but in a very safe environment with kind of a mentor on the outside that's helping them. So it's a bit of training, to your point. It's training, it's career progression. I think it's a good retention tool, to give people some slight, extra set of hands to do something differently that maybe they were frustrated with. So all that combination is quite interesting, I think, for corporate leaders.
So what is with the people who don't want to be, I mean, the leaders who stay put, who don't want to be in corporate ventures, who don't want to be the risk takers? Is there anything? Is there a caveat? Is there a warning from your side? Is there anything to say about, like, hey, watch it, that's the new world? Yeah.
It's a good point. It's a good question. You start to alienate them by saying, you're not cool enough to be out in this group now. Yes, I think that's a danger, but then also how you're the expert on sort of leadership change management, but you've got to change them at some point, because every company will tell you we need more innovative leaders, we need to be more innovative, like all the usual phrases. So how do you do that? One way is sort of peer pressure, that your peers are now starting to become more savvy, they know the lingo, they've done it a bit, got the hands dirty.
Yeah, absolutely.
That should start to raise the bar up, right? And these people that want to stay in their little corners and do their thing, they have a spot, but I think that it's companies want to be more innovative. This is a way to kind of also be more innovative, but then also kind of get their leadership to become more innovative as well.
So now we talked a lot about the advantages and for leaders, and what are the disadvantages? What are the disadvantages of corporate venture building for the organization, for leaders, for
So I think that's a great question. I think you would do it for the good side, but the bad side is what you touched on a little bit, is what happens to the people who are still back in the corporate, fighting the good fight, trying to launch things internally. They feel like someone's gotten a shortcut, right? And someone's gotten a bit of kind of free pass to go out and do that. So you can piss off the people who are trying to kind of go through the normal channels of project management, transformation, and it's hard work. Right? That is not easy work. So oh great, you bounced out, you made this big story, big splash. You got to go up to the CEO and tell how cool you are, and it can be seen as a bit of jealousy there, I think. It does cost money. You're paying external people, which you could say I have those people internally, which any corporation would, but are they the right person to do that job now? Can they kind of come up to speed in 30 seconds versus 3 months? So it does cost some external money that you probably wouldn't be paying internally. You've already got this, you already have the people, maybe not the right skill sets. I guess, and still there is some risk that it comes back to the corporation from a brand perspective, from a risk perspective. You can't kind of completely put these things into boxes. At the end of the day, people will know that there's a corporate behind that because somewhere along the lines it's connecting. It still has to connect back up usually to the bank or to the company or to the,
So I mean, Rob, that's absolutely fascinating. But what is your role as an external who came in? I mean, look, you're from the you're not coming from the law or from the you're not coming from organization development or maybe from, I don't know. You're not. I don't know what's your role? What do you do?
You're not interesting. I mean,
the product. You're not.
I pitch myself as sort of an orchestrator and translator, right? So I've been in the corporate space. So it's a big mistake that lots of startups come up and say, well, you guys are too slow and you don't do this and you don't do that. Like I always say, look, have you ever worked in a big corporate before? It's hard work, okay? It's not just, you've got matrix organizations, you've got, there's a structure there, there's a governance there, it's the way it is. So I understand what it's like on that side. So I'm never sort of, harsh on the corporate guys and saying, hey, you guys are all messed up. So I've walked in the shoes before, to your point earlier. And then I'm really an orchestrator. I am a master of, I'm the poster child for top of the T. So I know a little bit about a lot of things, and I know that, but I think I'm quite good at sort of bringing in the right skills. Where I find my role is really about looking ahead, always 2 to 3 to 6 months. So what's going to stop us next, right? How do we go faster by seeing those kind of rocks in the river, and then knowing when we need to invest in a new person, a new technology, a new process. And that's how I sort of tend to roll, is sort of I'm the translator with the corporates explaining that. I'm the translator of the startup talking about what the corporate world is like. And then I'm the kind of orchestrator along the way.
So you're coming in at the beginning, or when the corporate is started, or and when do you leave? When it is, what's the sweet
so
point?
normally it would be you come at the beginning, you structure the whole project and how it's going. Who do you need on the team? How's it going to work? What's the operating model, right? How we kind of control this thing too. And then I leave when things end. There's a natural end. As I said, there's sort of 3 natural ends to this. It dies and the project's over. There's a licensing or a sale, and you stick around to make sure that happens, that handover to another third party happens, or you're there for the integration back into the mothership, right? So how does that happen? So you don't want the mothership starting over again, right? That's the danger. So you've learned all these things, you've tested everything. As you start to bring it back in, they say, okay, let's do a research project about pricing. Like, no, we already checked the pricing. That's what we did. So you want to make sure that all the learnings that you have in this kind of high-speed, learning environment don't get reinvented and watered down and forgotten about. So there's kind of a torch-bearing role to kind of bring that back in.
Yeah, I mean, look, me as a novice in that field, I find it fascinating, and I can even see that in not even only in products or in design, but also in it could be even in learning and development. Some learning and development is very resistant to change, and so you could even do a corporate venture and create something, with virtual reality or something really new, and then but it must be also hard to integrate it back, because it's basically like a foreign object, it's like an alien coming back into the mothership.
Yeah, I don't have the stats on it, but I think you're right. I think the bringing it back in is one of the hardest things. It's tricky. But to your point about learning and development, I think that what I've seen is anybody in the sort of corporate side, and sometimes it's not everybody kind of leaves their role and goes away and becomes this. They have a kind of day job, and this is just one of another projects. But they get to see a different way of working, and this could be anywhere from project managers to delivery people. They just kind of see the pace, they see the kind of the clarity, they see the new tools that are being used. So instead of Microsoft Project, and now we're using Agile, we're using Slack, we're using this. So all of that is real life training, right? And they can maybe just pop in even as part of the project. They may be there for sort of a small piece of it. But to your point, you can do some sheep dipping along the way, and hopefully those people go back changed and at least saw something, instead of read about in a book or went to some seminar. They actually kind of saw how it works from a real life environment.
It's I am getting creative here too, if I may. I mean, it's actually your session, not mine. But what I can see is that look, in leadership development, we talk a lot about 70-20-10. So basically, how do you do learning on the job? And that is never really working. I mean, it's really difficult. What works, though, is project-based learning. You put the people in the project, and you learn. But it would be even better to put people in a new corporate and in a venture. In a corporate venture, and then learn there, and then come back with all that learning and even produce something. What is
cheap dipped, right?
New way, as you can see, how to draw the learnings out of it and reintegrate the learnings into the old corporate, the old corporation. Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Is there anything, seeing that we are almost at the end, is there anything I forgot to ask? Is there anything you say, oh, Marcus, that would be an interesting question you should ask?
Yeah, I want to touch back on the retention piece, because I think, I'm sure you see this, that you have your top talent in a corporate side, and, there's always the top 10%, or, and we need to keep the top talent in there for obvious reasons. And what I've seen is that top talent starts looking. And a lot of times they get frustrated with that world, and they think they can do a startup, and it's a normal path out, and that's how most of the startups will happen. I mean, they leave a corporate because they know where the holes are in the corporate world, right? Because they were running this project or this team, so they kind of know how to get back in and compete against that. So what they do is they spin out and they, create a little startup, and then they come back in and compete against that, and they hope to get bought back out by the corporate because, hey, I fixed the problem I know you had already, but I went outside and did it myself. So it works, and it happens all the time, by the way. But the corporate has lost that person, right? They've lost that frustrated entrepreneur, or we'll call them, and I think they're usually the top talent people as well. So why don't you kind of let them do it in a way that's safe and it's still connected back? They're still employees. You haven't lost them. And what I see is they come back, and I literally had a session just in Barcelona with some people from the corporate side that were part of this at one of the companies I was working with, and you could see their faces when they saw us and how we worked together. They were all lit up, like, oh, this was so much fun. I learned so much during that project. I mean, but they're still there. They're still, I'm saying, my point is they're still in the corporate now, and they're now applying that to new projects, right? So they're applying some of those lessons learned and doing that. So I see it as our L&D, for sure, kind of way to keep your top talent around, and it's very useful.
Wow, fascinating. Rob, thank you very much. I think that's it for today. It was a great learning for me. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Me as well. Thanks, Marcus. As always, great to catch up.